Hello! Today I will be talking about how physical damage works. As we can see here, strength governs your physical power. So if you have 1 strength, you will have 1 physical power. 3 strength is 3 physical power. Your physical power determines your physical power bonus. Physical power bonus determines the damage that your weapon outputs. Something that is very important to know is that if you have less than 15 strength, you effectively have less than 0% physical power bonus. This means you are doing less damage than your weapon says that it is supposed to be outputting. Let's say you have 10 strength and your weapon says it has 10 damage, you're doing less than 10 damage on your weapon. In order for you to get the full damage from your weapon, you have to have 15 strength. If you want to build into strength, I recommend not going any further than 50, because if you look at the graph, once you hit 50 strength, you start having diminishing returns and you only get 0.5% for each strength or physical power you go up. Increasing your strength between 15 and 50 is the sweet spot for optimizing your strength value. If you would like to take a moment to better understand the numbers on your own time, just feel free to pause it, and I'm going to go on to the next section. I will now go over damage before armor or penetration is considered. As you can see, I have the equation color-coded. I have also circled each corresponding piece of the equation in its color. So you can see that the base damage is green and the base weapon damage on the weapon is also circled in green. So to calculate our damage before physical damage reduction, we have to put together our base weapon damage, buff weapon damage, which is the +1 additional weapon damage we see here, combo multiplier, which is which swing in our combination we are, first, second, third, fourth, etc. Our impact zone multiplier, so did we hit it with the 100% zone or the 70% zone? Our power bonus, which is how much physical power bonus we have according to our strength and physical power. Additional damage, which is given through pendants, rings, etc. And hit location bonus, depending on if we hit them in the head, the torso, the arms, hands, etc. The total damage I got was 57.18. Be sure to remember 57.18 as I will be using it in our future calculation. Now that we have a basic understanding of the first part of the equation and what is factored in, I'm now going to include damage reduction, penetration towards that damage reduction, projectile fall off, and true damage. As you can see on the bottom left, I have a target with 50% damage reduction and 10% projectile reduction to factor into our equation. You will also notice that I have a longbow here with base weapon damage of battle axe stats. So I've altered it to reflect our previous equation with the 57.18 to keep it consistent. I've included projectile fall off. As more time elapses, the arrow will do less damage while it is in the air. Lastly, I've included true physical damage, which will be on a ring of quickness in this scenario. Before we included damage reduction and everything else, we had a damage of 57.18. However, putting into consideration armor penetration of 20%, and then the 50% damage reduction that the target is wearing, we then get a damage reduction modifier, which is essentially how armor penetration and damage reduction interacts in the game. Once we have that, if you are not a ranger, you don't have to include projectile reduction and projectile fall off, and you can skip straight to adding true damage. However, if you are a ranger, you would want to include projectile reduction and projectile fall off for the calculation. Our damage comes out to be approximately 17. I would also like to note that this did not include other factors such as divine strike, race damage reduction, and others. I believe these to be the most important factors when calculating damage. If you need more time to absorb and digest how these calculations are done, feel free to try a few yourself and see how it goes. Understanding additional damage and true damage will be very important for you when considering doing PvE and boss runs or PvP and player runs. Rings, gloves, pendants, and capes are the only items that will give you +1 true damage or +1 physical damage. You cannot have +1 true and +1 physical damage on a single item. Because these are the only item slots that provide these stats, you can only go up to 5 physical damage or 9 true damage. This is because you can have 2 rings, 1 pendant, a cape, and gloves. However, true damage is different because you have a frost amulet, which scales with its tier. This means that the highest true physical damage you can get is 9. That entails using a unique pendant, which not many of us will be using or have the money to do. Now let's identify when it is best to use armor penetration and when it is best to use true physical damage. As you can see, I have a bard versus a fighter and a bard versus a wizard to showcase. As you can see, I have a bard versus a fighter and a bard versus a wizard to showcase damage. We now know that armor penetration directly interacts with a player's PDR, and that true damage is just flat damage added at the end of the equation. If we then look at a bard versus a wizard with 15 physical damage reduction, we see that the damage goes up by 4 with the true physical damage, and the armor penetration only increases the damage by 1. My headset was bothering me, so I took it off. Here we can see how useless armor penetration is when the target doesn't have very much armor. So if you are a faster, lighter hitting class, such as Bard or Rogue, true physical damage is your friend. Even though armor penetration is very good against high PDR players, it does not scale very well against low PDR players. Additionally, true physical damage is very effective on these classes because they are hitting so often that they are able to get their true physical damage off more. For those of you who are slower but harder hitters, like a barbarian, this is how true damage and armor penetration works for you. I changed the damage to reflect that of a barbarian. However, the true physical damage and armor penetration still goes. If the barbarian uses 4 true damage against a 60 PDR fighter, they're doing 35 damage, while 20% armor penetration does 41 damage. So it increases by 10 damage. When we compare the barbarian's damage to the wizard with true damage and armor penetration, we see that the total damage for both true damage and armor penetration are very close to each other. From this, we can see that slower, heavier hitting classes benefit far more from armor penetration than they do from true damage. This is why true damage is so much more beneficial on faster hitting classes, because they have more opportunities to apply the true damage. To draw a parallel from my previous video, this is why Rondel daggers love using true damage, because they attack so fast, they're able to get their true damage off more often, so they are stacking up the numbers like crazy. Now that we understand when to use armor penetration and when to use true damage, I will be moving on. I'm now going to use Ghost King as an example of how to optimize your damage for boss runs. As you can see here, I don't know how she got there. I did not do that. That was weird. Now that we have the real Ghost King, I would like to discuss how to optimize damage for boss runs. Because mobs and bosses have negative 22% PDR, they take scaling damage from additional physical damage. So if you're just trying to do boss runs, additional physical damage is your bestie. If we go further and use Shriek of Weakness from Bard's Flute, it then takes the mob down to negative 78% PDR. When we do that, it makes the additional physical damage do 187, with the true damage doing 180. This means you could defeat Ghost King in about 13 to 18 hits, depending on high roller or normals. Not the craziest difference between additional physical damage and true physical damage versus mobs and bosses. However, it's very beneficial for you to understand how different damage works, what works best against mobs, what works best against players, and just understanding what you're putting on yourself. For example, if everyone is telling you true physical damage is the best stat to build, you're going to be throwing away a lot of money if you're trying to just do boss runs and dying over and over. I want to show you the price difference between additional physical damage and true damage. Here we have a Ring of Quickness with additional physical damage at 130. True physical damage, however, 185. It gets worse. Now I'll show you a Frost Amulet versus an Ox Pendant. You can get it for 400. If we go to a Frost Amulet that's epic, you get 650 for the lowest. So in wrapping up, true physical damage is a lot more pricey than additional physical damage when building. So if you're just trying to go for mobs, go for additional physical damage. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe down below. If you haven't already, please join my Discord down below. And I would also really love to see you join me in my Twitch community on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Sometimes I play with viewers who have been around for a little bit. So if that sounds like fun, I'd love to see you there. Thank you and bye-bye. By the way, if you don't like doing math, this one will just do the math for you. Just a disclaimer, gear added weapon damage doesn't exist anymore, so don't use that. Otherwise, it's great. It also doesn't have projectile damage consideration, so I'm going to put this in the description below so you can use it if you would like.